Three, two. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the March 2025. My goodness, 2025, Lindsay. March 2025. Let's talk. My name is John Raffaele. I am the Director of Educational Services with the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, and we are bringing you our monthly installment of Let's Talk, which is a conversation that we're going to have this month with my colleague and my friend Lindsay. You'll meet her in just a second. And Let's Talk is an expansion of a conversation and a discussion about our monthly articles that come out through the International Journal for Direct Support Professionals. And I'm going to tell you about that in just a second. But before that starts, welcome if you've never been to a Let's Talk event. We have these every month. We've been having these for over a decade. Every month for the last over 10 years, we go deeper dive into these really important articles that are meant to discuss and offer best practices for the work that direct support professionals do. This month's particular topic is so critical. It's one that I believe you'll see in just a moment how relevant it is for direct support professionals, and even beyond direct support professionals, relevant for every human being. We'll get to that in a second. Before we do that, housekeeping. Obviously there are interpreters, ASL interpreters that are here for you to utilize if that's something you do utilize. We also have closed captioning as well if that's available in our toolbar. Real quickly, the International Journal for Direct Support Professionals was founded at this point about 13 years ago by the great Dave Hingsberger and my colleague and my friend Angie Nethercott. As you can see, Angie's email address is there, as well as mine. At the end of this webinar, we'll give you my email address where you'll be able to write me to obtain this latest article, this latest international journal, and also you'll be able to post any questions to me, as this is a pre-recorded broadcast. We are not live right now. We fooled you. We fooled you for a couple seconds. Sorry about that, but this is a pre-recorded broadcast, so you can use the chat box, but nobody's going to answer you. But that said, you can absolutely ask questions, and if you have burning comments, send them to me, and we'll get them to Lindsay, our author, and we'll go from there. So let's get this. Let's do this. Look at this title. I love this title, Lindsay. Flipping the Switch. Flipping the Switch. Actually, there's a great Rolling Stone song on the album Steel Wheels. It's called Flip the Switch. Great song. But this is not about that. Compassion fatigue to compassion satisfaction. Let me say it again. Compassion fatigue to compassion satisfaction. I just love these words. By the way, Satisfaction, another Rolling Stone song. That's interesting, Lindsay. That's interesting. But who are you, Lindsay? Because we're going to talk about this topic, but we want to know who you are, and you're the author of this. Hello, Lindsay.
Hello, John. Thank you so much for having me and for this opportunity. It's awesome to be here. And honestly, it's just so nice to see you again. I met you for the first time just back in October at the Aura conference. So it's awesome to get to do this with you.
In beautiful
Uh,
Portland, Oregon.
yep, in beautiful Oregon, my home state, born and raised.
Awesome.
So there you go. There's a little about me.
Yeah.
As you can see on the screen, my name is Lindsay Dutton, or for those of you that may not be able to see on the screen, my pronouns are she, they, and I have worked in the intellectual and developmental disabilities field for about 10 years now. I started in the field 2015, working at a foster home with an awesome group of guys. And I had an awesome boss. And I actually met them. It's kind of a cool story. So I was working at a video store called Movie Time Video in McMinnville, Oregon. I had gone back to work there a second time. It was an awesome college job, and then I was kind of in between just young. I don't know what I'm doing still. And they were like, all right, we'll hire you back. So really cool video store. And these guys used to come in. I would chat with them and, they'd rent movies and we just, have so much fun chatting. And they lived in a foster home. And I didn't know a lot about the ins and outs of, working in this field and really a whole lot about that. And I asked um, the owner of the foster home that and the who became my boss. I was like, hey, have you ever hired a female before? Because it was all guys that lived there and it was male um, uh, people that worked there. And I was like,
Hmm.
I think I might be interested in seeing what you all do over there. And so I started out doing it part time while I was still working at the video store, and then transitioned into doing that full time. And then after that, I became a case manager, more specifically a personal agent that works at a brokerage. And I did that for a few years, and then I had an opportunity. I saw this job, and I was like, confidence wise, I was like, I can't do that. I'm not good enough for that position. Like,
Hmm.
there's so many other people that are way more qualified, but I'd always wanted to teach in some way.
Hmm.
So I applied for an OTAC trainer position with the ARC Oregon, and I've been here now for about 2.5 years. And I I feel like I'm finally where I belong and I'm doing, what I'm supposed to be doing.
Hmm.
And I love it. I love creating trainings, creating content, connecting with people. Um, it's actually my favorite way to connect with people is in that training space.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I have that, so people know that I met you and saw a workshop that you did at the Northwest Conference that's sponsored by the Oregon Resource Association. Every year, we're very closely linked and partners with Aura, and this topic, it just hit me in the heart and it hit me in the head, and I said, this Lindsay needs to do an article on this and get this out in front of a national, actually international audience. This is international. We're international. We're on the World Wide
That's
Web, Lindsay. We're on the World Wide
right.
Web. And but uh, here we go. I think this topic, and again, I'm going to put it up there. I can't. I just love the title, "Compassion Fatigue to Compassion Satisfaction," and the article is just so fabulous. Um,
Thank you.
and yeah, oh yeah, and so let's get to it. What inspired you to write about compassion fatigue? Because we hear a lot about it, but we don't get a lot of answers as to what to do with it. So tell us more.
That's part of my answer. That's exactly why I did it, because sometimes we hear these terms, but we don't know exactly what they mean. So when I entered the field, like I said, about 10 years ago, I wasn't aware of any of these concepts. I mean, they were words that I probably had heard, but I didn't know what trauma informed care was.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if to be honest, these are relatively new terms in the grand scheme of things, because the ACEs study that really informed trauma informed care and that the foundations of that curriculum, that was only in the 90s.
Could you,
Um,
could you describe for our listeners what ACEs stand? What ACE? What was? I forget what it stands for. ACEs. What is the acronym?
yeah, it's adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah.
So
There you go.
basically, those experiences we have before the age of 18 that can have a profound impact on us. So that really opened up so much, because a lot of the research that informs our understanding of compassion fatigue and resilience is really just, I feel like, from that last 30 years. Not that we didn't have those concepts and those terms, but really how we understand them. Because a lot, prior to that ACEs study, when we talked about trauma, a lot of it was in reference to veterans returning from war in particular. Um, so to kind of go back to the why, when I started in the field, I didn't receive any kind of trauma informed care training or really any training about the importance of self care. So, I didn't understand that I was working with people who have oftentimes experienced trauma and the way that can show up in their lives. But I also didn't understand that I was living with my own trauma and how that shows up, right? And so that combination of how people experience trauma and the way that can show up in our lives, whether it's work, home, what have you. Um, and actually, on that note, kind of going back to ACEs, they're a lot more common than people think. About 64% of adults in the United States reported that they had experienced at least one type of ACE before age 18. And then nearly 1 in 6 adults reported they had experienced 4 or more types of ACEs. So, like I said, it's a lot more common than people realize. And I think we just need to get a lot more comfortable talking about this stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think with just not even being, I'm not stating anything because of politics, but the reality is throughout the world, politics is traumatizing us, the political climate everywhere. And it's always, I think, to a degree, that's what politics does, I think, to humanity. But we're at a time right now where there's tremendous amounts of trauma that, in fact, when we talk about direct support professionals, people with disabilities are being directly affected by some of the decisions that are causing political decisions that are causing trauma for people.
Yeah,
So that's a whole other webinar, a whole other topic. So that said, let's do this because I love this. What's the water bottle analogy? What the heck? Why do we have a water bottle up there? What are you talking about?
What is this water bottle? So one of my favorite parts about creating a training is when I get to find all of the fun material to kind of help supplement, the content that I'm trying to, get to people, because we all have a different way of learning. Some of us are auditory learners, some of us are visual learners. So I try to always put as much different types of content to help support all those different ways that adults learn. So I stumbled upon this video, and this I want to make sure I give massive credit where credit is due. So in the video, we're going to see Dr. Roderick Logan, and he just has a brilliant way of explaining compassion fatigue via an analogy involving a water bottle.
Okay.
So I'm not going to say anything more. Let's play it and let people see.
Do it.
So I have in my hand a bottle of water, and it's just an average bottle of water. There's nothing particularly different or unique about this bottle of water. But it is a bottle, and it does contain water, and I've just removed the cap. So here's my question. Why is there water on the floor? Why is there water on the floor? Any guesses? Because there was a shaking? All right, thank you for playing. Wrong. We're going to make this fun, aren't we? Why is there water on the floor? I took the cap off and I allowed the water to go on the floor. Wonderful answer. Wrong. Thank you for playing. Isn't this much fun? I shook a full bottle of water. And Lou, that's a great answer, but again, it's wrong. We might think of a lot of reasons why there might be water on the floor. We could think that maybe there's water on the floor because of gravity. And as already has been said, because I took the cap off or because there's a shaking. But here's what we know that is universally true. The reason why there's now water on the floor is because there was water in the bottle. And I want you to reflect on that for just a moment as a metaphor, as an example of what we're going to be talking about today in terms of stress, body arousal, compassion fatigue. And what I'd like to suggest to all of us is that the shaking is not abnormal. It is the normal part of life and the work experience. The shaking is normal. And the reason why there is water spilling out onto the floor from the bottle has less to do with the shaking, and it has much more to do with there's water in the bottle. Now, if we compare this, a bottle that's now only nearly full, as a moment ago it was completely full of water. If we compare that to this bottle, where the water level is not at filled, but much lower, pointing out that the water level is here. And when this bottle of water experiences the very same shaking, there's little to no water that spills out. So in this demonstration today, we're creating an awareness and a context that the water level is kind of representative of the level of stress, and in some situations, toxic stress or compassion fatigue, either in the workplace or even in our own personal life. And our goal today, and the goal of that's a part of our mission for the work that we do and for the people for whom we serve, is not about getting the shaking to stop, because that's not something that's within our reach. So overcoming compassion fatigue with professional resiliency is not about stopping the triggers, stopping the shaking, or somehow magically changing our work environment to be ideal. But in fact, we're overcoming compassion fatigue with our own personal, professional resiliency, which in fact lowers our stress levels, lowers our toxicity, so that we have a lower threshold and an optimum range for tolerating changes in the environment.
Boom.
I've seen that video so many times, and every time I'm still just like in awe of his analogy.
So simple, but oh my God, it's profound. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Here's some questions. Let's dive into them. So, what is this? I mean, he kind of talked about it a little bit, but what is it? And in your article, you actually give symptoms and all kinds of interesting things. But what's compassion fatigue, Lindsay?
Yeah. So, and I do go into this a bit in the article, but just to kind of give everyone that definition, it's basically the experiencing, just a tremendous amount of just being exhausted from being a helper, because we're so focused on other people and taking care of people because we're helpers. We have big hearts. We're full of empathy. So this can catch up to us, and we may not even realize it. So what I was really hoping to do, and again, kind of going back to the title here, is, if somebody's already experiencing this, here's some idea of what we can do about this. But then, how can we also flip ourselves back over to feeling that feeling of compassion satisfaction? But to kind of go back to that video and that analogy is, as Dr. Logan explained, we have this stress that builds up and builds up and builds up. And there's some, we could go into the different types of stress and have another whole webinar, but there's different kinds of stress, right? So there's green zone, yellow zone, and red zone. So we've got good stress, we've kind of got that moderate stress level, and we've got toxic stress. So especially if we're experiencing that toxic stress and that water bottle is filling up, and he gives that analogy of shaking it, then that's going to spill out. That's going to spill out in our personal lives. That could spill out in our professional lives. So when we're taking care of others, we have to take care of ourselves. It's an overly used analogy, but I think it's because it works so well. It goes back to when you're on a plane, you have to put the mask on yourself before you put it on somebody else. As hard as that can be, especially with the different relationships that we have with the people that we care for, whether it is professionally or if you're caring for people in your personal life, it's the same thing. The relationship, if anything, that relationship, if you're caring for like a parent or a loved one, that compassion fatigue, I think, can just grow, right? Because, yeah, that relationship with that person.
Absolutely. And that second question there, and I'm thinking about direct support professionals specifically who are, I mean, talk about compassionate human beings, talk about people that we know they burn their candle at every possible end. And they often report burnout. They report being tired. They won't even call in sick
Yeah,
when they're sick because they're so committed and compassionate.
right,
But that second question there, I think they don't recognize that they might have compassion fatigue. Yeah.
right.
So how do you recognize it? I mean,
Yeah. And
yeah,
that's
yeah, how do you do that?
Well, and that's the thing. As again, I want to just highlight, the direct support professionals, any type of provider. We get into this role because we care so deeply, and we want to have positive change and help facilitate positive experiences for people. And we talk a lot about in the Oregon ISP process, which I do the trainings for, the concept of a good life. And essentially, what providers are doing is they're helping people find that balance between what's important to us and what's important for us, which is something we're all trying to do, right? We're all trying to balance those things.
Yep.
So when we have to do those things for ourselves, but then we're also helping others do that. So how do you recognize if you are experiencing compassion fatigue? So, I go into a lot of the actual symptoms. I don't want to dwell on the symptoms too much, but I'm going to mention just a few. So, I mentioned in the article that they can include physical,
Yep.
behavioral, and psychological.
Yep.
And before I even say any of them, I want to say it's important to be aware, but it's also important to note that these can also be tied to other medical reasons too, of course. So
Yep.
you always want to talk to a professional.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but the list of symptoms, it's a bit daunting to look at.
It is. It looks like the side effects of Ozempic.
Right. It's like when you're hearing the medications on
Yeah.
TV, they
Yeah.
rattle off all the,
Due
yeah.
respect to
Um,
anybody that's on Ozempic and so forth, but I don't know that what you know what I'm getting at.
yeah, yeah. So again, don't want to dwell on this, but a few
Yeah,
of the symptoms can include physical exhaustion, headaches and migraines, increased addictive behaviors for people who may struggle with addiction, trouble making decisions. I think that's a big one. Forgetfulness, depression,
sure.
a diminished sense of enjoyment, and loss of hope. And I kind of want to focus. So again, I don't want to dwell on the huge list of symptoms because my goal is to make people aware and not, freak people out. And that's why when I created the training, I tried really hard to balance it pretty evenly between here's this stuff that's kind of negative, but here's what we can do about it.
Yeah.
Here's what we can do together collectively as a society to help combat these things.
Beautiful.
So again, going back to those last two symptoms, because I think those two symptoms are really common, which again is a diminished sense of enjoyment and loss of hope. So in the article, I shared a picture representing responses to the question, what made you go into a helping profession? And I have like a little slide PowerPoint, it's all colorful. um, but if you're struggling to answer that question or feel like you can't even remember your why anymore, there's a chance you're experiencing compassion fatigue. Um, there could be other reasons, of course, but it would be something to consider. And I think, especially in this field, because we're so passionate, if that passion is depleted or depleting, I mean, that alone can be a really big sign. If you're normally really passionate about what you do, and suddenly you're noticing you're not excited to go to work anymore, you're not looking forward to this or that. And then later in the training, I ask people, what brings you joy at work? Because part of what I'm trying to do, especially if people come into the training space really exhausted, is remind people of their why. Because I know that helps me when I start to feel like, oh, I just can't do it anymore, you know. I can't talk about this stuff anymore. I'm tired. Reminding myself about my why. Really, for me, it makes a big difference. It has a big impact.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah. Um,
So
Go ahead.
the other piece of this is that also when we look at who does this direct support work in the United States, particularly when we look at the demographics, when we break it down as much as we can with the statistics we have, it's a lot of it's a single parents, a lot of single moms who are
Mm,
head of household. So not only is their work um, rooted in compassion,
yeah.
their lives as head of household single moms doing their best to be compassionate at home, it's a compounding.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that men don't also experience, personal life that is loaded with compassion. That's not the point. But when we look at the impact of this compassion fatigue that you just described, we got to do something for this workforce. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the third question there: what role does the workplace play? Because here's the thing: here's another piece of this. We know that organizations are not fully staffed. That direct support professionals are often called upon to do double shifts.
Yeah.
Uh, that's hey, that's the reality. And so, how can workplace culture affect this?
Yeah, I mean, workplace culture is a huge piece of this. One of the most frustrating, and I just wanted to touch back to that last question, but it kind of ties into this question too, is one of the most frustrating things about being a case manager is wanting so desperately, and this would apply to DSPs too. I mean, and really anybody in the helping profession. I know as when I was in that case management role, I especially felt this, but DSPs talk about this all the time too. You want so desperately to make a difference in the lives of the people you work with, but we experience a lack of resources. We experience red tape. So basically the bureaucracy of it all, um, you know, so that takes a toll. And that takes a huge toll again, just because of the huge hearts that the people in this field have, which again, just this shows the people, the workforce that we're talking about and why it's so important to take care of these people. We
Yeah,
have to take care of the people that are taking care of others. We have to. Or there's not going to be anybody left to take care of people because everyone's going to be exhausted. Um, so let me jump back to your question about workplace culture. This is actually that's like a whole nother
yeah,
training topic, honestly, that could
yeah.
be a whole nother um,
Lindsay, we address workplace culture in every training that we do, whether
yeah,
it's frontline supervisor training, our code of ethics training, whatever we do, and because it's we're direct support professionals. That's where they do their work is
yeah,
in provider organizations, and
yeah,
elsewhere. But that's if that culture is, you said the word before, toxic. If there's
yeah.
toxic stress going on and toxic things happening, it's bad. That's bad. I'm sorry. Continue.
No, and that's the thing is kind of going back to that video too. Dr. Roderick Logan said we can't stop the shaking.
Yeah.
And I can't even tell you the amount of times that I've tried to stop the shaking, whether it's for me in a caretaker role, for my mom before she passed away. I mean, there's just, and so we're all trying to stop the shaking, but we don't have control over that. So we have to focus on what we do have control on. But and I'll go into that a little bit more. But for the workplace culture, I probably won't say anything that hasn't been said before. But especially for people where these might be, new terms, um, workplace wellness is a huge part of trauma-informed care. We can all individually practice being trauma-informed. We can embrace the principles of trauma-informed care. But if our organizations and systems don't change with us, then it's not gonna have nearly the forward momentum that many of us would like to see, right? because we can do our parts individually, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. Um, so in the foundations of trauma-informed care, they actually talk about several protective factors. And I know we're limited on time, so I don't want to do a deep dive, but one of them, team support is a big one. And some of these probably seem fairly obvious, but again, until we're actually implementing them, it doesn't matter how obvious they seem, right?
Yep.
So making sure people feel like they're part of a team, they have social support. It can be hard to admit that we need support, but in this job, this workforce, we need support. We need all the support we can get, right? Takes a
Absolutely.
village.
Oh, oh, you kidding? Um,
Yeah. So, and then a couple of other things too, seeing change as a result of your work. And I think, again, especially when you're working with people, being able to have that tangible evidence that your work is important and helpful and that you're making a difference. And again, the workforce that we're talking about, that's why they're here, is to make a difference. So, whatever we can do to make sure that we're seeing even those small achievements, right? And celebrating that. And then training is a big one. I can't stress that. And it's so unfortunate how many organizations of all kinds, not just within our realm, don't give employees the proper time for training.
hmm.
I mean, it should be a given. It should be a given. And it's especially hard for DSPs because of that high turnover. I think it's really hard for organizations to, in those situations, to be able to provide that time because they're caring for people,
Yeah.
right? So it's tough. And then just the last couple, having a balanced workload, again, obvious, but has a huge impact, and we actually act on it. And
Yep.
then supervision is a big one too. Just receiving regular and predictable supervision, feeling like you can go to your supervisor, your boss, whoever. And again, so none of these are mind-breaking concepts, but we're not we're not doing them across the board consistently, obviously. So
Yeah, that's what you said. These have to be implemented. Can't just talk about them. So let's get to the happy stuff. Notice the happy slide. It's a happy
yes.
slide. What is compassion satisfaction? What is that? I mean, it might, again, sound obvious, but what does that really look like? How do you quantify compassion satisfaction?
Yeah, so I came across Beth Stam and her research. She actually created the professional quality of life measure, or ProQual, I think is how people usually say it, because that's a
Yep.
long
Yep.
long one. But it's a free 30-question self-assessment test, that was designed to assist helping professionals in evaluating their current levels of burnout, compassion fatigue, and compassion satisfaction. So I really love and appreciate her definition because it's simple and straightforward. So compassion satisfaction is described as the pleasure you derive from being able to do your work well. It's as simple as that.
Boy, I love that.
Yeah.
And
I
so when you unpack that, I'm just thinking being able to do the work you love well, there's so many barriers for DSPs,
There
for
is.
professionals, whether it's a lack of staffing, whether it's lack of petty cash, whether it's one vehicle for 5 people you're supporting. There's lots of barriers. But
Mhm.
they would do it if they had access to those kind of things. But there's, you know, um, so continue. I'm sorry, continue. I love that definition because it's also in that definition are, I guess, are it's what we need to do to remove those barriers. What do we have to
Yeah.
do to remove those barriers for people to
And,
do what they love to do well?
well, and that compassion satisfaction, if you want your team, your people to experience this, it goes right back to that workplace culture. So
Yeah.
our organizations have to enact these things. Because again, there's the individual responsibility, but we can only do so much as the individual, and the responsibility shouldn't be on us as the individual anyway. So So here's kind of what I think about, and John, let me know if you kind of feel the same way in your experience. I'd be willing to bet that people are more likely to leave a job over poor leadership and poor workplace culture than if they like the job or not. Obviously, we want to like our job. It's important that we like our job. But what I mean is that people could love their job, but have a terrible workplace culture. And I think the person is more likely to leave than a person who doesn't like their job. So basically, if you have a great workplace culture and you're not like loving your job, I think you're going to be more likely to stay, even if you're not like, what do you think? Has that been your experience?
100%. And I'm not gonna talk to you about what I left, but I left two particular jobs in my career because of that.
Yeah.
Toxic toxic workplace, a vacuum in leadership or a lack of leadership. Eh, you know, and DSPs are smart. They see through things, pretty darn well. And when they know that they're getting lip service, they know that. I mean, I'm just thinking COVID. I can't help but think about COVID, Lindsay. The organizations that kept direct support professionals in place were those organizations that really valued them and created environments where they were valued in a time when a lot of people, there was no other reason to stay, to think about it, people, what was it called? The Great Exodus that happened in a lot, not
Oh,
just direct support, but in work.
everywhere.
People
Yeah,
were leaving. People did
everywhere.
not leave, like you just said. People did not leave places where they were valued, in places that meant something to them, and where there was uh,
Yeah.
a culture of real acceptance and a mission driven culture, so forth. Yeah, I agree 100%. Um,
Yeah, and especially right now with all the things going on and this attack, basically, it's attack on like everything that I teach because basically, trauma informed care. I try to embed those principles into everything I do, and it's right. I mean, all of the principles are diversity, equity, inclusion. All of those things. So, it's more important. It's more important than ever before that people are taking care of their people. Take
yeah.
care of your people. If you want them to stay, give them a reason to stay. you know.
So that second question there, what practices can enhance compassion satisfaction? I guess on the very independent level, like what can a direct support professional do, like on a daily basis, to I guess to get better satisfaction?
Yeah, yeah. And I there's quite a few mentioned in the article, but I'm gonna focus on I think like three, depending on how long I talk about each one.
We got
Um,
5 minutes, so you do it all within 5 minutes.
Okay, okay. So the big one is, and this might sound honestly like it might sound super corny. And there's all these different, tricks and things, but I think a big one that people can do immediately is practicing gratitude. So and I know it probably it probably sounds lame or silly, but it really does work. Because basically what we're doing is we're forcing our brains to think about the positive. And science has shown us that our brains tend to default towards the negative, kind of that going back to the like, caveman times because we were in that, survivor mode. And that was kind of the normal,
Yeah.
so I think our brains, not that I'm a scientist or some expert, but our brains tend to go towards the negative more than the positive. So we're bringing that positive forward. And even on our toughest day, we always have something to be grateful for. Just the fact that I have a roof over my head when so many people don't, there's so many things that we can be grateful for. So I think trying to practice that, daily, maybe start out your day, end your day, middle of your day, whatever it works for you. Just tell yourself a couple things that you're grateful for. Um, and I think especially just like with anything else, it's hard to form habits, but the more we practice it, the more it just becomes part of our daily existence.
Mhm.
Um, I think another big one too, is sharing challenges and potential solutions with others.
Hmm.
So basically just having that person that you can go to, that you feel safe and comfortable with. We don't want to, um, expose trauma to people you know, without their permission, if we're going to have a tough conversation, but having that person, that, just that you can talk about stuff, whether it's a coworker outside of work. I think a coworker, when we're talking about the workforce, would be, ideal because, if you're working day in and day out together, you be that person
Sure.
for each other. But having that support system, um, so you don't feel like you're, down a creek without a paddle, right? nobody nobody should feel that way. And again, especially when we're helping, other people, because as we see, it can take a toll. So, and then the other one that I really want to share, that I think has also helped me
Hmm.
is, and you might relate to this, John, if you work from home a lot too, is establishing a transition time or an activity between work and home. And I
Hmm.
think for those of us that do work from home, this won't, I guess, relate as much DSPs, um, that are, out working, maybe in other people's homes. But
Yep.
even if you're not, just having, again, it's telling our brain, hey, work is done.
Yep.
It's time to, be home, or whatever. So again, we're helping our brain understand that the one thing is done and we're doing the other thing now.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
so, for some people, they may not need that extra support, but for some of us, establishing that transition, can be really impactful.
I love that. And here's the difficult side of that. I'm just thinking of the direct support professionals that hold two jobs, three jobs, even transitioning, going from job A to job B,
Mm,
taking as much time as you can take to decompress from job A to
right.
transition to job B. Yeah, you're not going home and eating popcorn, watching Netflix, but you're going to your
Right.
another job. But I can just see just going from one to the other without some very intentional break. Oh my gosh, that can be exhausting, and that can lead to burnout. So yeah,
Well, and they're sometimes going to different, people that they support too. So they might be going to different houses, going all over the place. So I think even having that transition time between, the people that they support, because I was just reading an article, and sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, John.
no, 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 please.
I was just reading an article, kind of on this same thing, but for therapists, just talking about, the workload for therapists who are seeing, sometimes 5, 6 clients in a day, and not having that transition time. And they're hearing some really tough stuff day in, day out, one person after another, and the toll that can take. So, I mean, and all of this stuff is applicable to anybody, providing support to fellow human beings, but especially the direct workforce, direct support professionals, therapists, all of these people that are, doing this stuff every day.
This important work. So, what strategies do you use to cope with stress and build resilience? Let's hear, and I'll tell you mine. You tell me yours, and let's and then maybe we'll end this wonderful let's talk with, I think, some personal ways to cope.
Yeah. Yeah. And what better time than right now, right?
Yeah.
And I think first of all, I think we all need to give ourselves, just some grace, because I think we're all struggling right now. Um, and I also want to say that we're all more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. And the reason I know that is because I am so hard on myself. This is something that my husband has to tell me quite often. The things that I've gone through in life, my husband tells me sometimes, he's like, if I would have gone through those same things, I don't think I would have made it. So I think we're all a lot more resilient than we like to give ourselves credit for. And I think talking about DSPs, and again, anybody kind of in that direct support role, there's two things, and I mentioned this in the article, that whether you think you are resilient or not, you are more than likely good at adapting to change. even if you think you're not, right? I change freaks me out, but when I look back, I'm honestly pretty good at dealing with it. I mean, I'm still here, right?
Yeah,
And
you're
then
still there.
another characteristic of resilience is actively practicing patience and kindness, which is like second nature for people that support others and DSPs. I mean, that's literally, it's like it's part of our being, right? When we care so deeply about our fellow human beings. So, and then I also want to note too, it's really important that people understand we don't have to possess characteristics of resilience all the time. Am I resilient all the time? I mean, I guess being here, yeah, but do I feel like I'm resilient all the time? I could tell you the last few months the last year I've been grieving the loss of my mom. So I've learned even more about myself when it comes to resilience. So having a sense of humor for me is a big one. That's a characteristic of resilience that people may not realize. I tend to have a bit of a dark sense of humor, but without that, I wouldn't have been able to navigate my life experiences, the experiences that I've had. So that's a big one for me. I'd probably smile and laugh at inappropriate times because,
Hey,
neurodivergent minds. But yeah, I think that's a big one for me. And then another one that I've um, been really working at, and it's really, really hard, is knowing your limits and actually sticking to them. Um, because we all have them. We all have our limits of what our brains, our bodies can do, but we live in a culture where our value is determined by how much we can produce and is very quantitative, right?
yeah.
Um, so for me, accepting that I live with multiple disabilities has really helped me with that process, but it's a work in progress. So that's one that I'm constantly working on. And I still beat myself up for it all the time because I want to do things that I see other people do, but that's a big one. What about you, John?
Yeah, I love yours.
Don't
I
be stealing mine. You got to come up with no, I'm just kidding.
um, well, there's a couple things for me. Music is critical for me. Music. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a musician, but music is how I heal. I listen to music more than I play it, but ultimately that uh, my family, my children, they give me reason to be resilient. They absolutely cause me stress, as any children do, but they give me hope, especially in times when the future is questionable and the world is at war. And I look to my children who they give me reason to be resilient. But to get to that resilience, I've been learning to take a lot more time for myself. And you know what? I'm eating the ice cream. I'm going to eat that ice cream. I'm not going to worry about my sugar or my cholesterol because I got that checked and it's okay. So I'm going to eat that ice cream. I'm going to watch the Netflix that I want to watch. I am going to stop work at 6 o'clock.
Yep.
I'm going to check the emails. Those kind of strategies, they've been helping. But ultimately, you know, it's certainly a work in progress when it comes to the strategies. So yeah, I
And
think
things ebb and flow too, I think is an important, what the characteristics that I'm showing of resilience today might be different 5 months from now. It's a ever changing thing. But I did want to say too, I'm also a huge supporter and proponent of sensory items, toys, fidgets, whatever you want to call them. I have a couple on my desk at all times. Oh, yep, John's got some too.
I am
You know,
yeah,
I've
and
I've
it
been particularly fond of this one right now because you can move it in all different shapes and it
yeah,
really keeps my brain that gets distracted easily very happy at times when I need to focus. But yeah, and sensory items are really a great potential thing that people can use with the people they support too.
100%.
Yeah, another thing that I use too, I experience panic attacks and anxiety. So I use the five senses technique. Um, and there's tons of different, I mean, if you look up the five senses or like grounding techniques, there's a ton out there. But I'm a big fan of I'll probably say the wrong mix of things, but it's like five things you can see, four things you can hear, a couple things you can taste, something you can touch. But that really helps me and has actually prevented, some panic attacks or like serious overwhelm. Not every time, because our brains do what they want. But yeah, that's been a big help for me.
Look, we have to stop our time. That's terrible. I don't want to stop, but we have to stop. I'm going to do something. May I, if I may, because you're
Yeah.
also a poet. You're a poet, Lindsay.
Well, I don't know if I'd call myself a
Yeah,
poet, but
no, you're a poet, darn it. It's in your article. May I finish our time together with your poem? Would that be okay for you?
yes, as long as you let me say really quick that my Grammy passed away many years ago, and we used to play the game where you write a sentence and then fold the paper. The next person writes a sentence, and you see how silly it ends up. But my love of poetry and I think writing comes from my Grammy because we did fun, little poems together when I was a kid. So I just wanted to give that little, my Grammy and my mom, they're both gone, but um, they made me who I am today.
And I'm glad that they were in this world to do that because the world is better with you in it.
Thanks, John.
So here's your poem, and I think it's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I hope I'm not a.
I'm gonna sit here awkwardly while you read my poem and
Yeah,
play
there you
with
go.
my.
Everybody, Lindsay's very awkward, but this poem is very beautiful. It's a great way to finish this topic. The tree blows wildly in the distance. I feel you. I am restless too. I've broken limbs and fallen leaves. I've been bent and almost snapped. You, though, you keep going. You keep dancing your dance and singing your songs of stories long forgot, life coursing through your roots. I wonder if I could learn your dance, your gentle sway, your wild songs, you wearing your scars with pride. What is this dance? And who wrote this song? The wind blew and whispered, my name is Resilience. Ooh, by Lindsay Dutton. And there's a little picture of him. It's in the article. There's a little picture of a tree.
I
Lindsay,
love my trees.
I love your trees. I love your poem, and love to you and all that you do, and the work that you bring, and what you do for people, those that are doing this work, and those that receive the services of people that do this human services work. The world is better for you, better for us because of you. So thank you, Lindsay, and
Thank
thank you for doing this article and this webinar.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. This was seriously my ode to case managers, DSPs, all of the helpers. This creation is my ode to all of them and my thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to Angie Nethercott, Chanel Salonia, who continue the work that we've done for over a decade with the International Journal and our Let's Talk series. Please remember that this is a pre-recorded broadcast. If you would like to ask any questions or have any comments about to Lindsay, please email me and I will make sure that Lindsay gets them. J. Raffaele at nadsp.org. You can go to our website, www.nadsp.org, and find my email information as well, and also some other goodies. But until next month, we wish you well, and we hope you remain resilient and find yourselves with a lot of compassion, satisfaction. And once again, thanks, Lindsay, and we'll see you
Thanks, John.
in Oregon.
And thank you for everything that you all do.